Good morning, everyone. Hi, it's great to be here. My name is Amina. I feel really passionate about You Got This. I was here at last year's conference, sitting where you are. I actually came with my husband and my son, who was 1 at the time. I wasn't organized enough to buy tickets for them, so we just rocked up and weren't really sure that we'd be allowed in. But I was so bowled over when the person at the welcome desk so kindly welcomed us in and said, yeah, of course, you should all come. So I feel this is a conference where they really put people first. And I love that we have this conference in the UK for early career developers. So thank you very much to everyone who put it together. So at last year's conference, I had been coding for a couple of months. Since then, a lot has changed for me. I continue teaching myself how to code. I got my first software engineering job. I now work at The Guardian as an associate software engineer on their digital fellowship program. I was lucky to receive a lot of support on my coding journey from many, many developers who acted as mentors for me. This meant that I was able to teach myself how to code. I didn't have to spend a penny, and I managed to do this whilst working full-time and with my care responsibilities. I went back through all of the messages that I had exchanged with developers whilst teaching myself how to code. And I counted exchanges with 60 developers who helped me. Some of those people gave me one code review. Some answered a few questions over the phone. A few paired with me every week. When I look back, I feel exceptionally lucky. Upon further reflection, however, I have to admit that not one of those 60 developers came to me. I have never received an email saying, hey, Amina, I heard you need some help. When are you free? I had to initiate all of those relationships. I had to reach out. I had to ask for help. You can create your own luck on your coding journey, and I want to show you how. It can be difficult to define mentoring. I see it as a learning relationship, usually between someone with more experience in the area that you want to learn about. But I think there are so many different types of mentoring, and I really believe that you can create whatever works best for you. Personally, I've used mentors for 2 main things. The first is technical help, and the second, career advice. So I've had mentors that I've paired with who have given me code reviews or who have just answered a technical question. I've also had mentors who have looked over my CV and cover letter, who coached me on how to get a job, and importantly, motivated me when I felt down. Incidentally, the title of this talk is a misnomer. You're unlikely to have one mentor who would meet all of your needs, and in fact, I advocate having several mentors. I'm often taken aback by how advice can differ so much from person to person. And I found that by speaking to several people, I get a richer experience. Seeking mentorship generally means that we have some sort of goal. And I think getting specific about this goal is really, really helpful. For example, instead of saying, I want to learn how to code, we could say, I want to learn this language or framework to build this project or to complete this kind of technical test. Getting specific can help us consider where best to find ideal mentors and helps us craft a clear call to action. I made a big mistake with this last year. Around this time last year, my goal was to learn how to code, or at least I thought it was. So when I approached people asking for help, I got responses like, "Have you built this kind of application?" or "Let's build this together." It was only a few months later that I realized my goal was actually to get a job as a software engineer, which required a completely different set of actions on my part. When I started learning about the job application process, I was surprised to realize that the learning I had been doing had not prepared me to pass a technical test, which was often needed before I could even speak to an engineer, let alone interview for a job. Once I realized this, I completely pivoted my learning plan and focused solely on technical tests. Upon reflection, I would have saved a considerable amount of time had I done the two following things. I wish I had spent more time introspecting, asking myself, what do I really want to achieve? What would make me happy and what's most important to me? The second thing I would have done differently is I would have spent more time researching what getting a job involves. There are so many blog posts online, so it wouldn't have taken me long to realize that I needed to develop a certain skill set to reach my goal. Doing these two things, introspecting and researching, wouldn't have taken me long, and it could have saved me months. What I've learned from this is that the answers we get from our mentors are only as good as the questions we ask. Asking the right question can save us time, money, and a lot of energy and motivation. So, we've got our potential goal. How do we initiate contact with a mentor? I'm going to run through some of the different online and in-person platforms that we can consider. I'll note why each platform is particularly good to use and how I think we can use it. The first is open source. If you have a technical goal that you're seeking help on, this could be a great channel. You may be able to work on a code base that has actual users in a team of developers following a normal development process. This is likely to give us a more realistic experience of what a typical developer would do day to day, rather than completing a side project. The best open source communities will give you code reviews. They may have chat rooms where you can seek further help and find someone to pair with. It can take time to find the right community for you. I love GitHub's advanced search feature, where you can search by language and even get really specific and search by the number of closed PRs in a certain time period to see how active the repo is. Once you find a few repos that you like and you've tried out, you could try reaching out to the most active contributors, see if they're willing to help. Being an active contributor can be time-consuming, so they might not be available, but they might know someone who is. I did just this when I was struggling to install a new open source project and ended up pairing with that person on a weekly basis. I hypothesize that a lot of open source contributors will be doing this work in their free time. Therefore, this makes for a really compelling set of potential mentors. They're already using their personal time to code, and it might not be such of an ask for them to share their screen and pair with someone instead of just coding alone. The next channel is Slack or similar public chat rooms like Gitter. We've got a number of meetups here in the UK established to help people learn how to code, and some of them have active public chat groups. You can join these even if you can't attend in person. CodeBar is a fantastic example of an active Slack group where people can receive code reviews and get answers to their technical questions. I find this channel particularly good for ring-fenced technical questions. You might see a pattern in who's responding to your questions, which explanations you understand the best. You could reach out to those people directly and ask additional questions. I used to do this and received remote pairing, which was really useful. The next one is LinkedIn. Some people see LinkedIn as unfashionable. I love the way developers use LinkedIn. Please do not contact me. I am not looking for a job. However, there are some developers who might use it. Certain groups who are likely to use it include those who are early in their career, maybe they've only recently found their first job, or perhaps developers who work for larger enterprises. If you're targeting a certain group, LinkedIn can be quite useful. It's also really good for people like me who had absolutely no industry experience and are starting to make those first connections. You've got 140 characters when you're trying to connect with someone. It's not much, so it's really important to be concise. I try and point out something that I admire about the person's profile or a blog post they've written. I also have a sentence about why my own story is compelling. For example, you could be a musician who's teaching yourself to code, or you could talk about a website that you just built in your spare time. I would then always have a very clear call to action, such as, would you have 10 minutes to speak on the phone about your experience at this company or this boot camp? I would also give an alternative, like, or I'd be happy to receive messages via email. A clear call to action helps our reader understand what we're asking for and why they should connect with us. Let's move on to Twitter. Twitter is fantastic for getting to know our industry. You can research popular influencers and hashtags and gain an understanding of current issues. We have some really inspiring developers who actually use their popularity on Twitter to help others by asking people to reply to their tweet about new jobs or people who are available to help others. There are a number of those people in this room right now. I've used Twitter to ask for conference buddies or help submitting a tech talk for a certain conference. For these specific calls to action, where you can tag a person or an organization who will retweet to a wider audience, this can be perfect. So what about in-person platforms? If you have the good fortune to be able to attend an in-person meetup or coding workshop, this can be the perfect place to find mentors, as volunteers are already likely to be very passionate and enthusiastic about helping others. In such meetups, I would usually ask volunteers if they wouldn't mind answering my extra questions or helping me get unstuck on a personal project. I would ask if I could connect with them online, and even if they couldn't help me themselves, I would always ask if there was someone else they could put me in touch with. Conferences can be game changers. At the end of last year, I watched my friend get a job at a conference that neither of us would have otherwise known about. I found great mentors and very, very close friends through conferences. However, this comes with the caveat that there are so many different types of conference, so I advise researching before committing. You could ask people at a local meetup if they've attended this conference and what the experience was like for them. Did they feel welcome? Were they able to initiate conversation easily with others? You could try asking conference organizers for a conference buddy, or just reach out on Twitter as we've described. Nevertheless, at any conference, it can be very hard to go up to people you don't know. Some of the easier moments are before or after a talk when you're sitting next to someone or you're in the lunch queue. You could try saying hi or taking up one of Matthew's tips. Find out how they're finding the conference, why they've come, and what interests them. I have had a couple of instances where people haven't wanted to speak to me, and I think that's totally fine too. If people don't feel like talking, you could try approaching the speakers who might be more open to this and asking if there's anyone they know who they could put you in touch with. So we've spoken about online and in-person platforms, tips on initiating relationships and conversations with people who might be able to support you. When I reflect on my journey, I realized that a lot of my relationships came from different platforms. So it might be worth not just focusing on one, but trying a few. I also noticed that these relationships were created over a period of time. I don't think they necessarily happen overnight. For me, I got my most active mentors over a period of 6 months or so. There are a few platform agnostic things we can consider when seeking mentors. First, I think it's important to say that we should always respect people's boundaries. It's also vital to stay safe online, especially when reaching out to people that we don't know. Creating a compelling story and understanding your why is advantageous. Why are you learning how to code? Why are you seeking a job as a software engineer? Most of us have a number of demands on our time, so being able to express your why might make your message stand out and be more attractive to a potential mentor. We also really need to do our research. It's better to read someone's blog articles before asking a question they've already answered elsewhere. Let's have a really clear call to action. You could offer that somebody responds to your questions via email or ask for a 10-minute call. This was really useful for me when I first thought about coding. I had a hypothesis that I would enjoy being a software engineer, and I wanted to design a few tests that would help me ascertain whether that hypothesis was true or not. And I reached out to a number of developers on LinkedIn asking for 10-minute calls, and I was so bowled over when people would respond, sometimes within minutes, being willing to give their time over the phone. And these 10-minute calls would often run into 30 minutes and over an hour. So I do think that people really are very willing to give their time in this way. I've also found it really useful to implement a testing phase. After asking for a defined action, you could assess if this person gives you helpful explanations, if you feel like you can communicate easily with them. Do they keep to your agreed meeting time? By asking for a small action, you can test if this is someone you would like to keep seeking support from. I also like to ask for referrals. If the person you've reached out to can't help, is there someone else they could put you in touch with? Social network research has shown that creating relationships with someone you know via someone else or have met randomly with little overlap in your current network can be incredibly valuable. These people were called weak tie contacts by Mark Granavetta in 1973. Because there's minimal duplication in network, weak tie contacts tend to know people and information that we don't. They might approach life differently. There might be little trust between you, but they can bring new information, new ideas and contacts to us. Asking for referrals allows us to make those weak tie connections and access completely new networks and opportunities. There are so many people out there willing to help. If we get a no from one person, we can learn from that experience, but we don't need to let that demotivate us from reaching out to others. We've spoken about initiating relationships. How do we nurture great ones? First, I want to talk about Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication and his work around communicating needs. It would be very wrong to assume that the mentoring relationship is only about the mentee's needs. It's very much about the mentor's needs as well. And this follows my premise that mentoring is hugely beneficial to mentors. How can we find out what our mentor's needs are? And how does this help us create a more symbiotic relationship? To understand the needs of our mentor, we could ask something like, I'm really inspired by how you give your time to help others. What motivates you to do this? When I've asked this question, I've received varying responses, all of which gave me some insight into my mentor's motivations and some clue as to how I could meet their needs. For example, one of my mentors said that he actually considered teaching as a career, but decided to be an engineer instead. He loves the process of helping someone learn a new concept. This is useful information for me because it means that mastering complex technical concepts is likely to be something he would enjoy helping me with. What are some of the other things that have proved successful for me personally? And importantly, how can you learn from the mistakes that I've made? First, I've rarely expressly asked someone to be my mentor. Instead, I have often found that the relationship emerges organically by both parties committing to speaking or meeting regularly. When having a call or a meet-up with a mentor, I've always tried to be prepared with an agenda, take notes of any actions, and to complete them when agreed. I find that this is a way of respecting and being caring towards this person. For pairing, I often describe the task or send the GitHub issue I want to cover in advance, and I'll ask for any reading or concepts that I can read about before the pairing session. Again, after pairing, I like to ask for feedback on what I can spend more time on practicing. I have made a number of mistakes. I have overcommitted to actions that were unrealistic for me to complete in the allotted time frame. When learning how to code, especially when juggling all of life's other tasks, we're likely to have other priorities. So it's really helpful to be clear and transparent about what's realistic for us. A painful mistake I've made is not requesting the easiest technical solutions. Sometimes seasoned developers can forget that we're a beginner and will receive a solution that they're most excited about, that is really fashionable or just the shiniest new toy that they can find. Now I prefer to ask for the easiest option so that I don't feel demotivated by how hard it is to implement something more difficult. Also, I want us to feel empowered to end mentoring relationships. They might no longer be working for us, or maybe we've already achieved our goal. For example, when I got my first job, I decided that I didn't need to work on code in my personal time anymore. I made the mistake that I wasn't so clear about that to my existing mentors. I would have liked to more transparently tell them this. I would suggest graduating active mentors into more passive ones, whereby you ask for help on an ad hoc basis, instead of necessarily coding on a weekly basis if you were. To conclude, overall, I believe that there are many people waiting to help you. In this talk, we've discussed assessing your goals, getting specific. We've looked at a bunch of different platforms that you can use. We've talked about some generic tips like storytelling, creating rapport, and creating a clear call to action, as well as having a testing phase. We looked at nurturing these relationships by considering our mentors' needs, making best use of their time, preparing for meetings, and actioning appropriately afterwards. We also looked at network research and how meeting people outside of our network can bring us new information and opportunity. Sometimes learning how to code can be tough. I know, I've been there. I want you to know that there are many people out there willing to help you. Create your own luck. Start initiating mentoring relationships today. Thank you.